Hello and welcome to Halftime Report. I'm Ekta Batra, with me is Manglam Malu, and we do have the WPI data which is on your screen for the month of May. It's come in harder than expectations, so 2.61% is where it's come in versus 1.26% on a month-on-month basis. We have Latha in the studio back with us after quite a hiatus for WPI. Latha, over to you.
Yep. The fact that this number would be positive is not a surprise. My poll was 2.4, so it's not terribly shocking. But you're right that it's coming in after about 15 months of negative number. Now, that is where the hint is. What was May WPI 2023? Minus 3.48. It was about the peak. Actually, June is the peak, when it peak as in the bottom. It had gone, I think, to minus 5 in June. So we are going to get higher WPI numbers starting now. But it doesn't look like it's very high. Imagine if it is minus 3.48 at 2.61, assuming the base is 0, we are getting something like a 5% or a 6% WPI. We have to watch this carefully. We also have to look at the fact that the metals prices have been rising globally. Right. The CRB index, I was looking at it, the commodities index, that one has risen year on year by about 17%. And about 55% of the WPI, our WPI index is impacted by these kinds, by commodity prices. And therefore, the core WPI also would have gone up. As you can see, manufactured products inflation is finally showing a positive 0.7 over a minus half or something year ago. Food inflation is obviously higher year on year. There it was not all that negative even year ago. And that's risen. Look at the potato numbers and all. All this is base effect. You have to, cut a lot of slack on it. Do we have our guest, Aditi, with us?
You spoke. Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
You spoke about the metals bit. We have some data out there as well. Basic metals index is up 2.9% on the month. So basically, month on month, there's an increase of around 3% out there. You did speak about core inflation. Core inflation too has turned into a positive trend, 0.4%. This compares with minus 0.7% in April itself.
Absolutely.
So month on month, there has been a move towards the positive terrain for core inflation as well, and all of that is reflected in the overall WPI.
Actually, you can go down that entire list, manufactured beverages, tobacco, textiles, every one of them is showing a month-on-month rise. So we have bottomed out as far as WPI is concerned. Just a very quick word before I go to Aditi. The GDP and the GVA numbers have been looking good because the WPI was negative. You didn't have to deflate it much.
Yes.
You counted nominally, you didn't deflate it much, so we got a very good GVA. Now you have to start deflating it with a WPI because the GDP has about 60% deflated by WPI and only 40% deflated by CPI. So a rising WPI will now have an impact. The GVA number will not look as good as it looked in the year before because the statistical deflator is going to be higher. But let me very quickly go to Aditi Nayar, the chief economist from ICRA. Aditi, what have you made of this 2.61? Are we now going to have a rising trend of WPI?
Thanks, Latha. Actually, our number was a little bit higher. We were expecting the WPI to come in closer to 2.9%. So I suspect some of the commodities, the base has caught up, but the actual month-on-month rise may not have been fully factored into the initial numbers, which is something that we see quite often with the WPI. There is a lag with which we see the transmission that is happening. But globally, the trends are quite visible. The Bloomberg Commodities Index is pretty much at or higher than the year ago levels. Freight rates have been rising. Domestically, food inflation is showing a little bit of a mixed trend while the monsoon has started off early, but it's scorching hot in the north, and that is definitely something that will have an impact on the perishable prices.
Aditi, 1 minute. I take your point about food and vegetables, which inevitably rise in June. But core inflation in CPI was like a dismal 3.1. And in fact, there are some economists who were even saying that by their calculation, it is 2.97. So won't that also dampen WPI rise?
So, Latha, I think a couple of things we need to keep in mind when we project the CPI core inflation going ahead. Last year, we were in a kind of Goldilocks for the Indian economy as far as the commodity prices were concerned, where we saw global commodity prices were lower, significantly lower on a year-on-year basis in many months of FY24. And that is something that helped to keep the prices of final output in check in India. And that's something that actually ended up dampening the core CPI inflation, particularly in the last few months of FY24. Now, perhaps the reverse is going to be ahead of us.
Okay.
Obviously, we're not expecting a spectacular rise in commodity prices the way that we saw during the onset of the Russia-Ukraine crisis. But commodity prices do look like they're going to be harder than where they were a year ago.
Yeah.
And so I think that will seep into both cores.
Okay. Just if you can give me one number, what are you expecting WPI in either this quarter or this year?
For FY25, we're working with 3.3% as an average for the WPI and 4.6% for CPI.
Okay. We'll leave it at that. Aditi, thank you very much indeed for joining us with your quick take on the WPI numbers. Slightly higher than expected, but it could get a little higher. As Aditi says, this year we may average closer to 4%, between 3.5% and 4%. It will have a minor impact on GDP also. That's very important to remember.
Doesn't have a much impact on what the RBI does, but we had Chetan Nayyar say that this year he has factored out any rate cut. Would you think, the CPI would have an impact as WPI is increasing, maybe CPI increases with lag?
No, of course, the inflation target is all important for them. It will have an impact. But actually, at this point in time, we have to monitor what difference the Reserve Bank wants between nominal interest rate and inflation, the neutral rate. That is becoming all important, and we will know that in the RBI bulletin. But I believe we have a very important guest waiting by immediately after this break. We're going to go into a quick break. Manish Chokani, Director, NAM Holdings, will be speaking with Anuj Singhal.